Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to the first in a series of videos that I am calling Dice Rolls Along the Rio Grande. This video series will cover a project that I am getting started, where I am building a set of forces to play the Two Fat Lardies skirmish game, Sharp Practice. And the forces I will be building will be from the Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848. So in getting started on this project, I have been wanting to get into Sharp Practice for a while. I've always enjoyed watching playthroughs of the games online, and I really love the Black Powder period, and so I wanted to get into the game. And so I finally decided to take the plunge and start building a force. But I decided to go a different route. A lot of times people will... I've seen people play Sharp Practice games set either in the French and Indian War, the American War of Independence, the Napoleonic era, or the American Civil War. But I decided to go a different route, and I am going to build a force from the Mexican-American War. Now, the reason I chose the Mexican-American War is that it is an era that I enjoy researching, that I've researched many times before and read many books about, and I really enjoy learning about it. But also, it allows for some good, from what I've heard, some good actual Sharp Practice-like games where you don't have a lot of long-range stuff. American Civil War, unfortunately, the rifle musket ranges in the rules for that era are very, very long and can, from what I've seen, can very much cause a game to be very boring in some cases, and that you have units that'll just be stuck in certain places. You need a lot of terrain so that way you can move from terrain to terrain and remain in cover and out of sight. But Mexican-American War, most troops are still armed with a smoothbore musket, and thus they can still use those ranges, and so that is why I am choosing this era. I've also chosen the era because it's a very colorful era, a very colorful war in terms of that it's almost a combination between Napoleonic and ACW. Napoleonic being in the Mexican army, which were very resplendently dressed in bright colorful uniforms and with lancers and cuirassiers and hussars. And of course you have Antonio Lopez de Santana, who's a very colorful character. And then you have the American army, which is led by officers who will eventually become, famous household names during the American Civil War, such as, Ulysses S. Grant, Robert E. Lee, George McClellan, James Longstreet, George Henry Thomas, P.G.T. Beauregard. The list goes on. All of whom, cut their stuff during the Mexican-American War. So I've started building my forces. I'm going to first be initially just talking about my U.S. force. My U.S. force is going to be taken from the force list provided by Two Fat Lardies, a Sharp Practice page for the Mexican-American War. And the force list I'll be building upon will be to the halls of Montezuma, which is the forces advancing upon Mexico City, is what it's mainly taken from. And that will consist of, my force will consist of 3 groups of United States regulars in line, 2 groups of drilled volunteers in line, 2 groups of regular U.S. skirmishers with muskets, 1 group of volunteer skirmishers with rifles, 1 cannon with crew, and 1 group of U.S. dragoons. And then there'll be some additional characters that I'll be painting up to add on to the force. But here we are getting started on painting up the forces. I decided to take an approach where at the very least I will paint up 1 group of 8, or at least 1 group each before I move on to the next group, and just kind of pace myself so that way I don't get overwhelmed with all the miniatures. And I feel like that can also help me get things done a lot quicker. So right here you're seeing some of the miniatures being painted up already. We have one group of the drill volunteers. So some of them are finished, some of them aren't. These guys are painted up like the 4th Indiana Volunteers. And so, kind of see here. Here's one of them. And these are all from First Corps miniatures. And I think they painted up quite well. The 4th Indiana, I found images, artists' renditions that show them in indigo blue uniforms, and I really like that because it helps add some breakup to the forces. And so these will be painting this as the first group, and then there'll be a second group coming soon once I get this one done. Some other people I have here. We have the leader of my volunteer skirmishers with rifles, and they will be Texas Volunteers. The Texas Volunteers are quite famous from the Mexican-American War period. And this guy is actually from Boot Hill Miniatures. They have an entire range of the Texas Revolution with Texians, Tejanos, and Mexican troops. And the Texians work perfectly for Texas Volunteers of the Mexican-American War era. And so this will be one of the leader figures for that. I decided I wanted to paint him up and see what he looked like, and I'm actually pretty happy with how he turned out. Love his hat, especially. So that's what my my volunteers will look like. Then over here we have an artilleryman, another First Corps miniature. This one's a little bit rough. I kind of got started on him. Probably will do some touch-ups as I go along. But I just wanted to get some paint on a miniature and decided to try that. Also like that he came with some little scenery debris to put on. We have an ammo box and a water bucket. It looks like a canteen underneath there. No, don't know if you can see it. And then of course we have one of the big men. It's a mounted colonel. I really like this mounted figure. It's another First Corps miniature. So, painting up him. So, this is the start of the project. And I'm really looking forward to painting all these guys up. And eventually getting them on the board. And hopefully by the next video there will be more painted miniatures to show you. Until then, thank you all for watching. And I look forward to the next video to show you my progress. Thank you all again. Have a good day. Sweetest rose of color, this soldier